trying to have a tickle in my throat. I'm trying to see. Okay, looks like I'm live. I got a tickle in my throat. Oh, that's annoying. Turn the sound off. That's annoying. All right, hey guys. I'm gonna turn this. I'm gonna put my laptop down over here, and I'm gonna turn this camera around so that I'm not checking myself out instead of talking to you guys. I'm out here on my deck, and I have the awning down. Turn this around. You've been to my lives before, you know how we do. And it takes me a minute to adjust things. And yes, I know that there's not that many people watching right now. 2 people watching, so say hey in the chat if you're here. But it takes me a minute to set things up and play around with things. So bear with me. As I've said many times, I'm not too great with this aspect of the video. But I'm trying to set it up so that my head's not cut off, and I will succeed eventually. So just give me a minute, be patient. How you guys doing? That's not bad, but I hate these weird angles. I really need a taller table to be working with. I just don't want anybody to be distracted when I'm trying to share what I'm about to share. I waited. I'm up a little late today, you guys. And so unfortunately, we got people out here, my neighbors, doing yard work and things like that. So I hope that it will ultimately not be too distracting. And I also have part of my body being roasted out here by this sun. I'm wondering if the best thing is really just to to move all together. Come sit on this table. I'm scared of these cushions. Excuse me. Get my laptop. Get my glasses. I'm scared of these cushions under the rain whenever it rains or in the morning. Sometimes these cushions. Thank you for your patience, you guys. Okay. All right, that's pretty good. I think that's as good as I'm gonna get it today. Maybe move over or move this over so that I'm not in the sun. I think that's it for us this morning. You guys, good morning. My name is Natasha. Welcome to my channel. I've been doing these lives, just sharing what God is showing me during my morning chill time with Him when I get up, when my family isn't awake, and I spend time with the Lord. I don't have a time limit on the time. I just open up my Bible and, I am following a plan. I just finished a Bible in a year plan. And, when I went through that, it was painfully it was painfully obvious to me, uh, not for the first time, that the Bible is not really laid out in chronological order, and my Bible in a year plan wasn't laid out in chronological order. And I found myself wishing that I could read it in chronological order. So now I'm on a Bible in a year in chronological order plan, and it just kind of helps me to orient the different things that are happening. Um, I think I'm excited about it. I've already been surprised that I never really thought the book of Job was taking place. I mean, on some level, I guess I read it before, but I haven't consciously considered that the story of Job is taking place, really should be in the book of Genesis. He's a contemporary of Abraham's era, and he's from the land of Uz, and I never really considered that before until I started doing this Bible in a year. So I started off reading Genesis, but instead of going all the way through Genesis, after a few chapters of Genesis, it jumps, and they introduce Abraham, it jumps to the book of Job. So that's where I am today, and that's what I wanted to share with you guys. This is gonna be, I think, the third time I'm reading the book of Job all the way through from beginning to end. And the second time I read the book of Job, um, it was with a Bible study that I was a part of. And hey, Atira! Hey, that's my buddy in real life. Good to see you here. So the first time I read the book, I'll say this: if this is your first time on a live with me, what I like to do is just get the word out, and then I come back and I go through the comments. So if you're here because you really want to chat with me, I encourage you to stay until the end so we could do that back and forth chat, because I discovered that unlike some other people on YouTube, I have a really hard time saying what I need to say, going back and forth with the chats and keeping my frame of thought. So since this is a word, I just need to just get it out, and then we'll come back and chat back and forth. Okay. And so the second time I had to read the book of Job, it was with a Bible study, and my heart dropped when I found out we were reading the book of Job. I thought it was going to be so depressing, and I really didn't want to spend, the bulk of that year reading the book of Job. But it was like the best experience. And for the first time ever, to me, the book of Job was a revelation of why we need Jesus and how Jesus functions in our life. And so I'll start off by saying that I used to be a therapist. Over 25 years ago, close to 30 years ago, I was a therapist. I have a master's in social work. And I had a client come in for therapy. And this client had been badly beaten. She had been badly mugged. It was so bad that the person who mugged her knocked all the teeth out of her mouth. And so, she wasn't in a financial position to get all the dental work done before she was in the therapy session with me. So while we were in therapy, she was always like manipulating her mouth so that I really wouldn't be able to see, what her mouth looked like. And she was devastated and hurt, really depressed and really stuck, because before this attack happened to her, she had been really productive and really successful, and it felt like it came out of nowhere. And as I was working with her, I was working with her through a pastoral counseling center, which meant that we weren't encouraged to proselytize and preach the gospel, but because it was a pastoral counseling center, if the client was already Christian, then we could work with them, applying biblical principles and using the Bible and things like that. And so I remember when I was working with her, I felt like the Lord was leading me to encourage her to read the book of Job. But at the time, I didn't understand why I was having her read the book of Job. And honestly, I think the book of Job is the longest book in the Bible. I think it might be. I thought Psalm, maybe I'm wrong. The book of Job, I mean, it really doesn't matter. It's a long book, put it that way. The book of Job has 42 chapters, and I know Psalms has, a good 100, and I'm looking at it right now, and y'all probably already know. Probably spitting out, Atira's probably spitting out how many Psalms there are. 150 Psalms. So there's more chapters in Psalms, but Job is longer. There's prose and poetry, and it's a lot longer. But anyway, I remember my supervisor asking me, why in the world would you have, a client in such a sad state, you know, bite into this, the biggest book of the Bible? And at the time, I really empathized with her, and I really couldn't wrap my mind around the kind of suffering she was going through and how her life had completely changed, and it just because of this one incident. And the only thing that I could think of that I felt that could relate and empathize with her on her level was Job. And so I encouraged her, woo, ladybug, ladybug. And so I encouraged her to read the book of Job. But at the time, I was only thinking about it in terms of empathy. But the book of Job is amazing, you guys. Because Job, because this happened to him, he asked a lot of the questions that every human has about why things are happening to us, why we're here, who God is, what role God plays with things. And there's a lot of truth, but there's also a lot of misapplied truth, because you'll remember that Job had a very limited view and a very limited understanding of God. You know, his experience and worship of God predates even when, God chose the people of Israel and revealed the law to Israel in a pattern for worship. A pattern for worship which included a lot of the things that Job knew to do, because we read in the first couple of chapters that he knew that there was only one God for him to worship. He had a habit of offering sacrifices for sin. So he had a concept of sin, and he had a concept of atonement for sin. And I think a lot of that is because God walked from the time of Adam, with those people, leading them to do certain things, but he just hadn't given them the whole picture. And so Job has a really limited understanding, okay? And from his perspective, everything that happens in life is controlled by God. If something happens, God is making it happen. God himself is doing it. Okay? He has no he doesn't seem to have much of an understanding about the laws that God has in place with how he um he expects things to function. Like, the analogy I could make for this is, we have certain laws in place in our society, that, you can't murder people. If you murder people, you have what happens to you, and it can be proved that you murder people, you'll at least be incarcerated. And depending on the laws of the state that you live in, you may even have to face the death penalty, right? And so if a person murders and it's found out and brought to legal attention, then the judge has to follow certain steps. The judge can't just decide, yeah, you're guilty of all this stuff. Here's $1 million. Go live your life in Fiji. You know what I'm saying? He's bound. He sets certain laws in place, and his job is to enforce those laws and to uphold justice. So God, in a similar way, has certain laws in place and certain systems in place, that he operates within his creation. You know what I'm saying? And certain things are set in motion as a result of these laws. And but in a sense, nothing can happen outside of his control. But in another sense, I would say God honors what he has set in place. So if that could be viewed as a limitation, I guess, but it's one of his own making, okay? And so so the book of Job to me is really a wonderful um, exploration of the assumptions that we have and the conclusions that we come to because of the assumptions that we have, and how wrong we can be. How logical it can seem based on what we know and what we understand, and how far off we can actually be. Okay? That's, to me, one of the greatest gifts of the book of Job. So, little bit of a backstory. I think culturally most people know the story of Job, even if you're not really much of a Bible scholar. But I'll just recap briefly. Okay, so this is a story of a man he's a wealthy man. Okay, he's also an admirable person in his community. He's wealthy. He has a family. He's a good father. He handles his business well. He's well known in the community. He advocates for the poor and the people are that would need his support and his protection. And he knows God, he submits to God, he fears God, and he does everything that he can according to what he knows to live a life that is blameless before God. Okay, and so that's what we're told. If you were like a regular person looking at the life of Job, that's what we're told that he's like. So I think he has 7 sons and 7 daughters, and it names all the animals that he has. And in terms of that time and that culture, he was a very wealthy man with a lot of influence. Okay, and so that's what's happening in the natural world. That for us, what we can see, hear, taste, and see and feel, what we know. But what's interesting about the story of Job is it also gives us a glimpse into what's happening in the spiritual realm. What we like to think of heaven, like what we like to think of where God is. Because the Bible says God is a spirit, and no man has ever seen God the Father in the spirit. You know what I'm saying? And so this story gives us a glimpse into what's happening in the spirit. And this picture is painted, and it says that there was a day, in the spirit realm during Job's lifetime, when Job is doing his stuff with his family and offering his sacrifices. He had some sons. You know, he was so blameless before God that he had a concern that, oh, my sons might mess up, and sin some kind of way. So I'll offer a sacrifice just in case, to cover their sin, just in case. Not that I know they sinned, but just in case they sinned, and he would regularly do this. So this is a person who is conscious of sin and wants to do everything in his power to prevent sin. So in this way, his heart is blameless before God. You know what I'm saying? So while he's walking out this type of lifestyle, in and of as far as he knows, doing everything right that he knows to do, okay, in the spirit realm, something else is playing out. So this day happens, and it says the sons of God. And if you look at other places in the Bible when they're referencing the sons of God in this way, and also the context of what they're describing lets you know that the sons of God that they're talking about are the angels. Okay, so during this time, the sons of God, the angels, are coming back and forth to report to God. Okay, they're coming to report to God. That kind of makes me think, of like a briefing, like you got sent to do something, and now you're coming back to your superior to let them know that you did it and what the outcome is of what you did, which is interesting because God knows everything, but yet he has this process in place where there's communication that's happening between him and the people and his messengers. You know what I'm saying? And it says that at this time, the angels are coming, and so this makes me think these are angels in right standing with God. And at the same time, Satan comes, and he's called the adversary. The word for Satan in that portion of Job literally means adversary. So he's coming as an adversary, an accuser, okay, an enemy, right? So at the same time, he comes, you know, and it says when he comes before God asks him, what have you been doing? So this, what the first time I read this, it blew my mind, because it made me realize that, you know, unlike how some people perceive Satan, that, you know, they think of Satan and God's relationship kind of like the concept of yin yang, that, you know, everything, there's an equal and opposite to everything or whatever. You know, there's this supremely good being, and equal and opposite to him is this supremely evil being. But that's really not the reality of the relationship between God and Satan. The reality of the relationship between God and Satan is that there's a supreme, infinite, all powerful, omnipotent, magnificent, majestic, all good, all powerful, sovereign being. And then down here is Satan that he created. That's off, that's evil, that's doing the wrong thing. But they're not equal. And so this story lets us know that Satan has to report his actions before God. This story lets us know that Satan's actions are limited by God. Okay? He can only do what God allows him to do. And God is aware of what he's doing, because he has to report what he's doing in this story. You know, and it also demonstrates that God's not this impersonal God far away that doesn't see what we are doing. Okay? Because as this story unfolds, when God asks Satan, "Where have you? What have you been up to?" Satan goes, "Oh, I've been on earth. I've been wandering all over the earth, to and fro in the earth, back and forth in it." And there's a scripture in the Bible that says our adversary, the devil, Satan, roams around like a raging lion all over the earth looking for whom he can devour. And we know that Satan only comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. So he's wandering all over the earth looking for who he could tear up. You know what I'm saying? So this is basically what he tells God. Well, I've just been in the earth, going back and forth in it. And we know that God's not an impersonal God that doesn't know us on a personal level, because God then says to Satan, "Have you considered Job? Have you checked my boy Job out? He's a blameless and righteous man." It's almost like he's saying, "Well, have you noticed Job? I'm so proud of Job." You know, and there's a part of me when I was reading this passage is that I'm like, "God, why are you talking to Satan, and why are you bringing my name up? Don't bring my name up to Satan. Dude's out here trying to devour and destroy. Why are you bringing my name up?" Don't turn him in my direction. Okay? And so he asked God, God says, "Have you noticed Job?" But God has a purpose and a plan. That's the reason. That's another thing that I learned from the book of Job. My thing is, don't mention my name to Satan. Don't sick him on me. I'm trying to serve you. Don't make him look at me. But God's thing is, but I have a purpose. I want to reveal, and in this passage it talks about how this is really an object lesson to the angelic beings. Like there's this unfolding story that God is revealing to the angels about, his relationship with man. you know and it's interesting that, you know he tells Satan, "Consider Job." And so he's blameless, he's righteous. And so Satan goes, "Well, of course he is. Why wouldn't he be? You've put a hedge around him and everything that he has." And what that made me think of is, oh, so you had noticed him and you wanted to go up against him before, but you couldn't because God put a hedge all up around him. Hedge meaning, he put some kind of defense all the way around him so that, you know, he couldn't be touched, his family couldn't be touched, his wealth couldn't be touched, and he could prosper. Which is what God promises to do when we obey him in obedience, right? And so Satan was like, if you took this hedge away, he would curse you. And so basically, to Satan, the only reason he's serving you like this is because you've been so generous and you're giving him all of this stuff and you're protecting him. But if you took that away, you would see he's really not devoted to you. You know what I'm saying? He's basically saying the kind of relationship you have with Job is the kind of relationship people have with Santa Claus. They expect him to give them good things because of their good behavior. But how would you feel about Santa Claus if you were nice but he didn't give you anything? You know what I'm saying? And so it's interesting to see, you know, is that true? Is it true that people worship and serve God and remain devoted to God because of how he blesses them? If you read the Bible, you know that the people that were the most blessed of God for their obedience were the children of Israel. And despite the fact that they were prosperous, in fact, because they were prosperous in the seasons of their greatest prosperity, you know, what ultimately ends up happening to them is they get complacent, they feel like they don't have God, they get bored, they're looking around and they want to be like the people around them, and they turn to fake gods. You know what I'm saying? That's the nature of man. Honestly, we don't offer more devotion to God because of his faithfulness and his goodness to us. And that's largely because of the sin that came into mankind because of Adam's disobedience. And I think Adam and Eve are probably one of the greatest examples of this, that they had everything that they needed, that they were in this beautiful place, that they had perfect relationship with God, but that Satan could come and tempt them with something. You know what I'm saying? He was able to come and tempt them that, oh, there's one thing you don't have. You're not like God. He tempted them with the very thing he wanted. He wanted to be God. You know, he tempted them, well, if you eat out of the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, then you'll be like God. That's something you don't have. And that's a good thing. Why would God withhold that from you? You know what I'm saying? It's like FOMO, fear of missing out. Okay, so we do know that what he's saying is a lie, that the character of man is not to offer God more devotion because of the way that he blesses them. And God knows this. And so God's response to him is, okay, fine. Okay, you can touch everything he has, but don't touch him. You can't touch him. You can't touch Job. Don't touch his body, but you could touch everything that he has. So it talks about how Satan, you know, goes out there and it reveals all the different ways that he works. You know, he takes these evil raiders and he makes them, you know, steal all his oxen and, you know, kill all his servants. And you know, his kids were in their house on their feast days, the ones where Job had been so worried that, oh, they might sin, so let me give a sacrifice. They were having one of those, you know, and he makes a strong wind come and knock the house down. You know what I'm saying? And all his children are killed. You know, and one thing after another, he makes fire come out of heaven and consume, so he can manipulate the elements. He could inspire evil men to do his will. You know what I'm saying? You know, he can, you know, cause people to die prematurely. You know what I'm saying? Within the confines of the limitations that he has according to what God has said. And so a lot of times people look at that to say, well, God allowed it, so it's his fault. Okay? But don't forget what I said about that. And I can explain it. Okay? I can explain it with, you know, with the, or I can try to explain it. But I think any explanation we try to make is incomplete. So more than trying to act like I have all the answers and to present a complete picture of why God allows certain things and why this wouldn't make me think of God as being unfair, cruel, kind of like treating you like a chess piece in a game and he's like the master manipulator. I More important than that, I think in this story is to get from this story that there were things that Job knew as a man, and he used those assumptions to try to explain what was happening based on what he knew. But the truth is, he didn't know everything. He didn't have the whole picture. He didn't have the full understanding. Okay? And so what ends up happening is that in a very short period of time, like it's almost like the devil was like, "Oh, you took the hedge off. I'm just gonna go for it before you change your mind." And he just took everything, destroyed his business, destroyed his resources, you know, killed his children, tore up his family. You know what I'm saying? And then Job said, "Oh man, the thing that I feared came upon me." You know, he did all of that and just to wait to see if Job would curse God. God knew Job wouldn't curse him. You know, Job's attitude toward that was, well, you know, again, with the mentality that God's in control of everything, Well, God gave me everything that I have. Okay? He gave it all to me. And what can I say as a man if he wants to take it all away? He gave it, he took it away. I'm very devastated by this. He didn't not have any reaction to it or any emotion. In fact, he talks about how heavy and severe his grief was. But his reaction wasn't, how could God do this? This is so unfair. Here I am, a righteous man, and he's taking all these things away from me. I don't want to serve that kind of God. That wasn't his reaction. His reaction was, well, God owns everything. He gave all these things to me. You know, if he wants to take them away, what can I say? He's God. Blessed be the name of God. And it says that he tore his clothes and put the dust, which is a testament of his grief. But then he went and he worshiped God in response. And Satan must have been like, whoa. So when he went back up to God again to give a report, the next time, God was like, look, you did all the stuff you said you were going to do that would cause Satan to curse me, but he didn't curse me. What do you think about that? You know? Hey, silly mommy for life. What do you think about that? You know? And God was like, well, Satan was like, well, that was just stuff. Okay. You didn't let me touch his body. If you let me touch his body, then he'll curse you and die. Because man will do anything to protect his body. People will do anything to keep themselves from being hurt, even curse God. Okay? And so he causes Job to have these boils on his body from head to foot. And it sounds absolutely disgusting. Because if you read through the chapters, it talks about how these boils scab over, they flake off. It talks about dust and worms cake up all up in it. And all he can do is sit in the garbage dump and scrape himself off. The garbage dump meaning there's an area where the community would get rid of their trash. That's where he would sit. And it'd be smoldering all the time. You know what I'm saying? That's where he would sit. Almost like he's sitting in a literal natural hell. Scraping himself off. He's still mourning and grieving over his kids. And his loss of respect in his society. He's embarrassed. He's humbled. He's humiliated. He's grieving over the loss of his kids, and his body's all tore up. And his wife, who, let's not forget, has just lost all her kids in one shot and all her wealth in one shot, comes to him and is like, Job, I feel like we read about it like her attitude was, just curse God and die. But we could also look at it as, her attitude was, I just can't see you suffering like this anymore. God made this happen to you, because that was their perspective. It's God's fault that all this stuff happens. God made this all happen to you. Just curse him and die, And he responds to her like, man, you're talking like these other foolish women out here. We were more than happy to accept all the good stuff from God. If he wants to give us bad stuff, should our attitude change? Again, this understanding that God is sovereign. Whatever he wants to give us, he can give us. Okay? But what really made me come on here today and do these lives is because Job is in this condition now with this disease that's tearing his body up. He has a lot of pain. When he goes to bed at night to try to get some rest, he has a lot of, troubling dreams and fears, and he can't find rest in sleep. He can't find rest during the day. And he talks about how, he doesn't understand why this has happened to him. And the biggest question for him is he really would like to know why. He believes God made this happen to him, but he doesn't understand why. You know what I'm saying? It almost makes me think he's wondering, well, what could I have done differently so that this didn't happen to me? Like, why did this happen to me? And part of the reason for that is because the understanding that people of that day have of God is made very clear by his three friends that come to mourn with him and see how he's doing and comfort him and support him. And we have no reason to think that these are not good men that really care about Job, that really love him, because we know he's in a humiliated position in society, because you know how our culture does. When you're on top of the world and you have everything and you have something to offer, people are all around you and want to be with you and want to see about you. But when you've lost everything and you're sick and you have nothing left to offer, and people see a great level of suffering, that it's almost like they feel like, if I get close to you, this might be contagious and it might happen to me. And a lot of times when you find yourself in that place of suffering, it's a very lonely place. Okay, so I think that speaks a lot to the fact that these three friends would come and want to comfort Job and be with Job. And we know when they first come that they really care about him, because they're horrified and devastated when they see him. They could barely recognize him. He looks so bad. And it says that they sit with him for 7 days in silence because of the extreme level of suffering and grief that they find their friend in. 7 days without talking, they just sat with him like, dude. Okay? And then after that period of stupefaction, as good friends do, I guess they want to offer some kind of solution to get him out of this situation, to turn things around and to maybe see what they can do. Because again, they all think God did this, and based on what they know about God, okay, even based on the more recent knowledge of what happened with Noah's flood, what happened with Noah's flood. God put Noah and his righteous family in the ark, okay, and he saved them because of their righteousness. But the flood came and destroyed all the other wicked people in the land, and the land itself was corrupted, and even the land living animals were also destroyed. Not the sea creatures; they weren't destroyed they could live in water, but the land animals were destroyed. You know what I'm saying? So their understanding is, we need to obey God, we need to follow God, because he does judge the evil and the wicked. He even destroyed most of the world because of their wickedness. You understand what I'm saying? And so now that they've been stupefied for 7 days, they finally start to talk to Job, to try to, hey Loretta, Mayo, to try to see, okay, now what can we do to get God to get you out of this situation right here? Okay, so his first friend Eliphaz starts talking about how, well, obviously you must have sinned, okay, because God, oh, good things happen to good people and evil things happen to evil people, okay. We thought you were righteous, but obviously you must have sinned, so you need to repent so God could take you up out of this situation right here, okay. And so he just goes on and on and on, trying to find ways that he could look at Job's life and see, well, we thought this was righteous, but you must have sinned. And Job is sitting here like, but wait. And this is to his credit. He's like, I know I did. As far as what I know how to do, I know that I didn't sin. I know that, not that I didn't sin. I know that my ways are blameless. That there's a difference, okay? This claim is not that Job is a sinless man the way Jesus was sinless and never sinned, okay? So I have to be careful what words I'm using. It's not that he's never sinned, but he's blameless in the sense that when he does sin, he repents of his sin. And he's blameless in the sense that he fears God and tries to live his life according to the laws that God gave them in their time. And God assessed Job in that situation we saw happening in the spirit realm by confirming that, yes, Job is blameless. Okay, so because we know what's happening in the spirit realm and we know what's happening in the natural, we know that his first friend Eliphaz is wrong. This stuff did not happen to Job because God found blame in him and God was punishing him for something he had done. You know what I'm saying? So that's the first thing about how we make assumptions about God based on what we know and what we understand, not realizing that we don't know everything. We don't have all of the pictures. And based on what we know, we're not even attributing blame to the right places. Okay, because in this conversation between Job and his friends, they reason out how, well, God did this. God killed your sons. God took your stuff away. God did this and God did that. But is that really what actually technically happened? God put parameters around Satan, because when the sickness came on his body, what God told Satan was, okay, because Satan was like, well, yeah, he didn't curse you, even though he lost all his stuff and he lost all his children. People are fickle like that. They would even sacrifice their kids. You know what I'm saying? And they could let go of stuff. But if you touch their body, then they'll curse you. God told Satan, you can make him sick, you could hurt his body, but you can't take his life. So God was in control of that. He didn't allow Satan to kill Job. Okay. And so, you know but who made it happen, though? The person that they said, oh, God sent his fire out of heaven. God didn't send his fire out of heaven. Satan caused fire to come out of heaven, because to a certain extent he can manipulate the elements. And they just attributed it to God, but it wasn't God. You know what I'm saying? You know what? I have an interesting application of what I believe what happened to me in real life of Satan manipulating the elements. Okay. When my son got married, because it was COVID, my son just got married in June. He got married on June 13th. And when we were planning the wedding months and months and months in advance, well, not that many months, it was a quick turnaround, but it was before, the switch had made with the regulations in society, with more things being able to happen inside. So the way we planned it, we were thinking we would have to do everything outside. And so we have some really blessed friends who offered us, their property to host the wedding. And so, they have a grove. It's beautiful with trees. You know, it was kind of like a circular grove, and the trees, the branches kind of come over, so you're outside, but it feels like you're in a building with green walls. And so that's where we had the ceremony, and then we had a tent right next to it for the reception. And so that day, the weather was forecasted to be beautiful. There was like a 3% chance of rain. And when we woke up that day, the skies were blue, it was sunny, the temperature was perfect, you guys. It was like in the low 80s. Okay. And so we're going about our business. Nobody's expecting it to rain. It's a 3% chance of rain. Okay. But when it was time for the wedding to start, it started to drizzle. Okay. And so, my son and his wife, they're strong believers, so their bridal party, everybody really, is trying to serve God with all their heart or whatever. So people immediately start to pray and beg God to make the rain stop and blah 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 blah. But me and my husband Rod, we've just been so steeped in this revelation, of how things work and what's going on in the spiritual realm, and what may actually be going and what may not actually be going, that something just rose up in my spirit. And it happened separately, because I was with the bride and the bridal party, and my husband was with the groom and the groomsmen, and the same thing was happening to us at the same time. I was like, get out of here, Satan. You know what I'm saying? There's a 3% chance of rain. There's a 3% chance of rain. Get out of here with this. Get out of here with this rain. You know what I'm saying? I was like, it will not rain today. In the natural, there was only a 3% chance of rain. There is no reason for it to be raining right now at this wedding right here. You know what I'm saying? And my husband was having the same experience. So the groomsmen were out, in the there's like an open field next to the tent. And they were out of there praying, oh God, please take the rain away, blah, blah, blah. Asking God, please let the weather. My husband went out there, he was like, y'all need to command the rain to stop. This is not God making it rain. This is Satan manipulating the weather, trying to jack up this wedding. You know what I'm saying? For no reason. It's a 3% chance of rain. And so my husband, I didn't hear him because I was inside with the bridal party. But my husband was like, "Get out of here, Satan, rain, stop right now." Or so he said something like that. And it stopped raining. I don't know the time frame of when he was saying what he was saying, but I remember as I was walking out and the bride was behind me with her mother, we were all walking out. We felt it wasn't like a steady stream of rain. It was just a, you know how when it's first starting to rain, it was just a drop, a drop, a drop here and there. You know what I'm saying? That's what we were feeling. I don't know if it had been raining heavier before and we were just starting to experience the rain stopping as we came out. Because my husband said that some people had opened up umbrellas. You know what I'm saying? I was like, we're not trying to have this wedding out here. In the tent, it would have been fine because the tent, even if it was really, really raining, you would have still been dry. But with the chairs all out in the grove, pictures with a bunch of umbrellas, I really didn't want that. You know what I'm saying? And so what ends up happening is that as we're walking out, there's a drop here, a drop there. And the bride behind me, I heard her whisper, "Oh no, is that rain?" And she's barefoot. You know, if you saw the wedding pictures, I don't believe in fairies and all of that stuff. But based on movies, the Disney shows and things I've seen, that's what she looked like. You know, she was wearing a T-length, gauzy, floaty wedding dress, and she was barefoot. You know, that's how she wanted it. It was just beautiful. She was just gorgeous. But anyway, and I know she's thinking, dang, it's gonna be squishy and muddy out here if it rains. But I don't know if that's what she was thinking. But her mom said, no, no, it's not. It's fine. It's fine. And I said, this rain will stop, or something like that. By the time we got to the end of the grove to start walking down the aisle, the rain had stopped. And it didn't start again for the entire wedding. Okay. Now, it wasn't a bright sunny day like the forecast was expecting it to be. It was a little bit overcast. Okay. But that actually worked out in our favor because when we were all sitting out in the grove, there was no sun beating on your head. And the pictures were just gorgeous. The pictures were just gorgeous. If you talk to any photographer, a bright sunny day because of all the shadows can be challenging for pictures outdoors. But that slight overcast, but still nice. It wasn't like a dark day. It was just slightly overcast, was perfect for their pictures, and it all worked. The temperature was perfect. The tent was like next to a pond with the breeze blow. It was beautiful. Okay, but if we had assumed, oh, this is God, 3% chance of rain. How could you, God? You knew we were having this wedding out here because of this situation we're in, with this situation all over the world that we're in. That's why we had to do this outside. How could you let it rain? And it's only 2% rain. Oh, God, how could you? Oh, God, 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 God. Because of your limited knowledge and understanding and not knowing what was really going on, you thought it was God, but it's Satan. Know who your adversary is, know who your enemy is. But what made me come on here, you guys, was what I read in Job chapter 9, verse 32 to 33. So his friends are saying he sinned. Job is saying, I know I didn't sin, but I do think that God, did this to me. And I'm so miserable. I'm suffering so much. I just want it to stop. I just want to die. So his first response to you must have sinned. He's like, I know I didn't sin, but I wish I had never been born so that this didn't have to happen to me and I didn't have to suffer like this. So this lets us know that when he said, blessed be the name of the Lord, he's not some kind of, masochist that was loving to suffer. Oh, I'll just suffer for the Lord. God is sovereign. He let this happen to me. Oh, I'm so happy that my kids got killed. I'm so happy that I lost my wealth. No, that wasn't his response. He was devastated that his kids were killed. He was in severe pain that all of this had happened to him. But he didn't allow that to make him curse God. But he still was wondering why. Why did this happen to me? What is this life that we have as men? You know, our life is just like a breath. It's just such a brief time that we're on the earth, and you have this all-powerful God that we must bow down to and serve. But he's kind of impersonal. He's really far away. He has his way of doing things. I can't question it, you know, but I did the best I could. Why is this happening to me? You know, and then he knows that it's God and he wants it to stop. But then he's thinking to himself, okay, I think I'm righteous. I can't figure out what I did wrong. Okay. I think God is doing this, but I'm just a man. He's God. He made me. And he made everything. He controls everything. I see that he controls everything. He manipulates the elements like they're nothing. You know what I'm saying? If he wanted the sun to stop shining, he could make the sun stop shining. That's who I'm dealing with. That's the kind of God I'm dealing with. And I think today, because of our culture, because now we have the new covenant, and now we have the blood of Jesus and everything, sometimes we've gotten extremely um irreverent of God, I think, to a certain extent. And to a certain extent, I think a lot of times we can forget who we are dealing with and what kind of God we're dealing with right now, and how great, how awesome, how powerful, how magnificent God really is, and how autonomous he really is, you know, and how sovereign he really is, you know, because Job's thing is he created all of this. He created this. Okay, I'm just a regular man. Okay, and my existence is just a breath. So I'm just like that. I'm here today, gone just like that. Okay, I think I'm righteous, but how am I going to bring some kind of case in front of God? Okay, so in Job chapter 9, 32 to 33, it says, for he is not a man as I am, that I may answer him, and that we should go to court together, nor is there any mediator between us who may lay his hand on us both. So he's saying, listen, we're not dealing on equal terms right here. You know how Satan tries to act like he's equal to God, and we think he's equal to God, and he's trying to deal with God on equal terms. Job is blameless in the understanding that he can't deal with, he's not equal, that we're not on equal terms. You know what I'm saying? We're not on equal terms right here. Okay? So he's like, I have a case, you know, based on my understanding of right and wrong, justice and injustice in the culture that I'm living in. I believe that good things should happen to good people and bad things should happen to bad people. And it looks like some injustice has occurred here. I'm not accusing God of injustice because I know I can't form my mouth like that. But I'm wondering, in and of myself as a man, in the knowledge that I have, I don't see where I am to blame for what happened to me. Okay, so I want this to stop. I need God to stop. But how can I make him hear me? How can I make him listen to me? How can I go and have some kind of interaction with God? Okay, knowing what I know about God, can I challenge God? And let me tell you, people out do this all the time. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. Or, you know, there's so much evil and wickedness in the world. I'm not serving that kind of God. Do you know who you're dealing with? Do you know who you're dealing with? That's what Job is sitting here having a dilemma about. I feel like I I want to bring my case before God, the one and only righteous God, the one who's in control of all of this and who can change all of this. How do I get a day in court with God? I'm just a man. I don't have a lawyer. There's no lawyer that can take me into the courtrooms of God. There's no number I can call. There's no secretary that can make an appointment for me. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing I can do. I'm a man to get into the spiritual realm and stand in God's courthouse so I can tell him, see, God, please, please. He said, and then he goes on to say that there was another verse that I read in verse chapter 9, verse 14 to 15, you know, he talks about what his behavior would be when he got to court. His behavior, if he could get to court, his behavior wouldn't be, God, you know, you've done evil. There's been an injustice done against me. Look, I have proof that I have been blameless and that this shouldn't have happened to me. Now reverse this, you know, because it was wrong for you to do this to me. That's not what he was planning to do when he had his day in court. He said, how then can I answer him and choose my words to reason with him? This is verse 14, chapter 9, verse 14. For though I were righteous, I could not answer him. I would beg mercy of my judge. So he said, if I even got a chance to go in court, even though I know that I'm blameless, I didn't do anything wrong for this to happen to him. When I finally got in court, just knowing who God is and everything from chapter 9, verse 1 through 13 talks about everything that he knows about God, which gives him this perspective of how out of God's league he is. He said, if I got my day in court, the only thing I could do is just beg for mercy, mercy, mercy. I'm not challenging anything that you did. I'm not saying you were wrong to let this happen to me. I'm not arguing about that or anything. You are God, but just please, please, please heal my body and get me out of this mess that I'm in right now. Or please stop. You know, he talks about the suffering that he has. And this is what is so wonderful about poetry. Because I feel like poetry can communicate things that prose can't communicate, because it pulls a visceral response from the reader that communicates so much more than a couple of sentences just with a few images. And he talks about how, you know, the situation he finds himself in, he feels like God has stuck arrows in his body. You know, he feels like God, from the hand of God, arrows were shot into his body. And his spirit is just sucking in the poison of these arrows. That's the amount of torment and suffering that he's in. Yet he's not able to die. He's not able to die. He's thinking that, you know, and this is another interesting thing that I think this perspective is still alive and well. We have this perspective of death that, you know, when we're suffering in this life, death must be better. Okay? And I don't know if we think that, because if you look at a dead body, the person looks like they're sleeping. And it seems like that any suffering or thing that was able to affect their body in this life, now that they're dead, it can't touch them. And so we have this idea that after you die, that must be a more peaceful condition than whatever we're suffering with in this life. And I think we think that because we only think of ourselves as being a physical being. You know, we think we are this body. You know what I'm saying? And so if this body dies, then all our suffering must stop. You know what I'm saying? Because the physical suffering has stopped, then all suffering must stop. That's what we think, and that's what we understand. And as you read through Job, we find out that God challenges Job on his understanding of death. You know, it's almost like God is saying, you want death because you don't know what death is. You think you'll find comfort in death because you don't know that that's not going to bring you comfort. Okay? And it also challenges the other assumption that not only do you stop suffering physically when you die, you just stop existing altogether. Okay? And we think that because we don't have a connection to people anymore when they go from this life. Okay? And so we assume that that means they don't exist anymore anywhere. Okay? But this whole story challenges that, because Job is experiencing everything he's experiencing with his five senses in the natural world that we know. But through this story, we know that there's also another world that's happening in the spiritual realm that's affecting everything that Job is experiencing, but he just doesn't know about it. He doesn't have the knowledge of it. But it's real enough that it's affecting him. You know, it affected him enough that he lost his children, he lost everything that he had, and now he has this terrible disease in his body that he can't get rid of. You know what I'm saying? So just because he doesn't know about it doesn't mean it's not affecting him, and it doesn't mean that it's not real. And he's making all these assumptions based on what he knows, but all of his assumptions are wrong because there are some very significant things that he doesn't know. And this story tells us that what we think about death is not true, that there's more information that we don't know. You know what I'm saying? In the Old Testament, it says to be absent from the body, which means when this physical body dies, is to be present with the Lord. Paul talks about that. Okay? So it's not that you stop being, your physical shell stops being the host of your spirit and soul, but that other aspect of you continues. And it has an awareness now in the spiritual realm that we didn't have access to before. Okay? And so if you feel like God's judging you on earth in the body that you're at, what makes you think that climbing out of your body is going to make that suffering end if God's causing it? Okay, so it's almost like God is telling, is wanting Job to know he might want to reconsider that. Not saying I am making you suffer, but if you think I'm making you suffer, I'm able to make you suffer in this body and beyond. So suicide, you guys, is not a thing to make it all stop. It's not a thing. We don't have all the information. Okay, we don't have all the information. Yes, it'll make whatever's happening right here in your body in the natural realm stop, but how do you know that you're not going to experience something just as bad or worse in the spiritual? Because things are happening in the spiritual that affect what's happening in the natural where we are right now. Okay, so it's powerful, you guys. It's powerful. So what made me come on here and say all of this is that this situation that Job sees about his condition in and of himself as compared to God and dealing with God is the same for us today. God hasn't changed. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And when you continue reading Job, you know, for 30 something odd chapters, he's just complaining about his situation and wanting to hear from God and wanting to hear from God and wanting God to answer. And, you know, he addresses God even more than he addresses his friends in response to what they think is why everything's happening to him. He tends to level his questions to God. And it seems like God's not saying anything to him. God's definitely not talking to him through his friends who are saying a lot of truthful things. They're applying a lot of truthful principles and they're saying a lot of truthful things. They're not applying, they're presenting a lot of truthful principles and saying a lot of truthful things, but they're misapplying them left and right. Oh, well, I know this is this, so this must be the reason, and this must be happening because of this, and they're all wrong. So they're not speaking for God. So to Job, it seems like God's not even answering him. You know, and it's not even until the end of the book that God finally does answer him. And when God answers him, he doesn't say why. He doesn't tell Job why. He validates Job's initial assessment that you're not on the same, we can't reason together. Okay? I'm way out of your league. I really am. I can't really be challenged. Okay? Thank God he's good. Thank God he's just. Thank God he's merciful. Thank God he's long suffering. You know what I'm saying? Thank God, you know, he really wants us to have life. And he doesn't want anybody to perish. Okay? But he is the creator, you know, and as his creation, we can't get all up in his face. And we do. We think we can. We have a misunderstanding of where we are as compared to where God is. But yet and still, even despite this inequity, we are to understand our value and our worth in God, to God, in what he did, in creating a mediator for us. Not creating, but in allowing there to be a mediator for us. You know, there's a scripture in First Timothy 2 and 5, and I'll read several different versions because I like the insight that you get from these different versions. The New King James Version says, "For there is one God and one mediator between God and mankind, the man Jesus Christ." The New Living Translation says, "For there is one God and one mediator who can reconcile God and humanity, the man Christ Jesus." The Passion Translation says, "For God is one, and there is one mediator between God and the sons of men, the true man, Jesus, the anointed one." So the book of Job isn't about how much suffering a man can take in a chess game between God and Satan, his equal and opposite adversary, just to show that God was right and have bragging rights and give Job a consolation prize of double for his trouble. What the story of Job does is it presents the possibility that even if in and of your own self you could say you lived a blameless and righteous life before God, he is so much greater and so much out of our league that you wouldn't even be able to get your day in court in and of yourself. You need a mediator. And so God provided a mediator, and that mediator is Jesus. So that's why, if you're barking down some other religion, some other path, your truth, my truth, our truth, I have my own way of worshiping God. I have my own relationship with God. I have my own. And it doesn't go through this mediator, you're really barking up the wrong tree, because this story reveals to us what gulf there really exists between us and God. You can't even get your day in court without Jesus. You can't even get your day in court. Okay? And he presents this dilemma so well, and asks all of the questions we have today, you know? And the answer to all of it is Jesus. Jesus is the answer. Jesus is the one, you know. And the beautiful thing about Jesus is Job, he's presenting this story of this blameless man. Even though he's blameless in the flesh, he still can't get his day in court. But Jesus will bring a guilty as sin person who has admitted and confessed and repented of his mess, filth, and sin, and apply his own clean, blameless blood on this person that does deserve to be condemned, that does deserve to be judged, that does deserve to have everything taken away, that does deserve to be tore up and punished, and will clothe that person in righteousness and render of, present that person as blameless before God. So it takes our story one step further. You know what I'm saying? It takes our story one step further. And God is saying there's no way you can have your day in court and be declared not guilty without Jesus. That's what this story is really, really about. Isn't that, and I just get geeked out about it every time. And I'll confess, when I was reading this, when it was time for me to read Job again, I was like, okay, what else am I going to get from Job? You're going to get something else and something else and something else and something else. Because the word of God is alive and active and sharper than any two-edged sword. You know what I'm saying? And it goes on and on and on, that if it was possible to divide soul from spirit, from body, it could do that. You know what I'm saying? And so my excitement is showing, y'all. My excitement is showing. This is good. This is good. Try it. Try it. Try delving into the Word of God. So that's all I have for you this morning. Let me see what these comments are saying. We got a lot of people here with us today. My buddy Atira, hope you're still here. Silly Mommy for Life, you're always here with me whenever you can catch a live cast. Thank you so much for your support. She says good morning. She says, wow, this is very powerful. Okay, speak it. Thank you, girl. Loretta Maya says, good morning. Angela Simon Kenny says, good morning. Silly Mommy for Life is welcoming Angela and Loretta. Silly Mommy for Life says she seems like she was very beautiful. Yes, you're talking about my daughter-in-law. She was just really beautiful, and just a real example of why it's good when you go and say yes to the dress and choose your wedding dress or whatever. Make sure you're choosing something that you that reflects who you are, because I think more than anything, I think what she chose to do with her appearance was it highlighted and and supported who she really is, and so she couldn't fail but to be beautiful. You know what I'm saying? And nobody could outshine her that day. She was so beautiful. She still is. She come over here in some tank top and shorts and sweatshirt, and she's beautiful. She's just a beautiful person. I'm very blessed to have her as a daughter. So now I have 5 daughters, y'all. 5. And it's so funny because I thought I would be better mother for sons, but God gave me 5 daughters. Okay. Silly Mommy for Life says, yes, it's your spirit that lives on, and that is a good, and that is, and that is judged. And she said, good morning, Valerie. Atira says, great teaching. You hung with me all this time, Atira. Thank you. Thank you. It's God. It's the Holy Spirit. And now more than any other time, I feel like we really have to have this proper perspective and understanding as we assess the world around us, as we assess politics, as we assess what's happening in our community, in our nation, in our neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? As we look at science and understand science, just understand that things that are happening in the spiritual realm affect things that are happening in the natural. And we're coming up with all these conclusions based on things that we think we know, but there are a lot of things that we actually don't know. That's why we need to turn to God for the revelation, to know how we should operate, how we should act, what we should flow with, what we shouldn't flow with, and get this, who we should actually be praying against, who we should actually be warring against, who we should be struggling with. You're over here praying against whoever's president right now. I think every president has the same thing in common. Every president has people that are 100% sure God put him there, and just as much as there are people that are 100% sure God put him there are people that are 100% sure God didn't put him there. You know what I'm saying? And you there steadily doing stuff in the physical, doing stuff in the natural, accusing people of stuff, and you don't even know what's really going on and what's really at the root of what's happening for things. And you get on somebody else's agenda, and you get on somebody else's platform, and you get up there and you preach this as if it's biblical truth, when really, these are the things that men came up with in their limited knowledge and understanding. And to be honest, in being convicted about this, it makes it so that I'd rather get up on, if I'm given a chance to teach and preach behind a pulpit, you know, unless God specifically gave me a word to give that had me promoting some kind of political position or objective, I would rather not speak um, or promote somebody's platform on that, and just, you know, use this, y'all. This is what I want to hear over the pulpit on Sunday, not your political candidate that you are just absolutely sure you know exactly everything that's going on, but you have your limited view of what you know in the natural, and you might be wrong. That's what the book of Job, that's what I get out of the book of Job. you know and Jesus reiterates this when he's arguing, and not arguing, but he's having conversations with the Pharisees. They're arguing with him, but there's no argument with Jesus, because Jesus is just speaking truth. It is what it is. There's no defense or argument. You know what I'm saying? And so they're speaking all the stuff they think they know based on their knowledge of the law and their understanding of life. And a good example of this is when, the Jews have this law, had this law that, if your brother's wife died, then another brother had to marry her and give her children so that she wouldn't just be, a widow left out with nothing. And so they present this crazy story to Jesus. Well, what if a brother had a wife and then he died, and then his brother married her to honor the law, and then he died, and then his brother married him, and then he died, and then all these 7 brothers had her and they all died. When she gets to heaven, whose wife will she be? And what Jesus answered them was, the only reason you're bringing this dilemma to me is because you don't know everything. You have the wrong idea about what life is going to be after death when you get to the other side. You're making assumptions that whoever was your wife in this life, when you die and go into eternity, that person is still your wife. Let me educate you about what's going to happen in the next life. In the next, not the next, I don't even want to call it the next life. When you transition to the other side, I think for me is a better way for me to think about it. Okay? The next life would make me think that there's a period of time where I stop having consciousness and then another life starts. But if it's more of a transition, I could think of it more. I really feel like it's more like if this body was like this dress that I could just take off. There are scriptures in the New Testament that talk about death, like taking off this body. You know what I'm saying? If I could just take off my body and move, and my spirit and soul is still here, I'm just out of my body because I'm a 3-part being: spirit, soul, and body. You know what I'm saying? My spirit and my soul just moves on, but there was never a moment where I was just out of it. It's not like when you go to, I think part of the problem is we think of death like we think of when you fall asleep at night and you just don't have any consciousness until you wake up the next morning. And I think we must imagine that death is like that, because I feel like the closest thing we have to death is what we experience when we go to sleep. But that is not the case. I noticed that my stuff, okay, my Wi-Fi lagged for a minute there. But what I was saying is that the closest experience that we have to what we might imagine is death might be like, is when we fall asleep. But that's a lie also. Because if you study sleep, you don't cease to know and exist and comprehend. There's a lot of mental processes that are happening in your body while you're asleep, and dreaming that happens, even though you might not remember your dream, but in that moment you were conscious of your dream. You know what I'm saying? And I know this to be true because I used to think, oh, I haven't dreamed in years. And then I had a friend tell me, just ask God to help you to remember your dream. And I asked God to help me to remember my dream. And all of a sudden I was dreaming every night. I don't think I started dreaming. I was always dreaming, but I just didn't remember my dream. So I assumed that I didn't dream. You know what I'm saying? So just realize that we don't know everything. And then when I asked God to bring my dreams to my memory, then I was able to access the dreams that I didn't have. And so I really do think death is just taking this body off, and then your spirit and your soul moves on. Okay? So whatever you needed to deal with God in this life, that situation doesn't change just because you've died. You can't escape his judgment by dying. You cannot escape God's judgment, and you cannot escape suffering by dying, because your consciousness continues. And I know that this goes against what a lot of people believe, but this is what Jesus preached. Okay? He even challenged them by reminding them that they really shouldn't think of their forefathers as not existing anymore. The God of Jacob, the God of David, the God of Abraham. Jesus said, I'm not the God of the dead. So Abraham, David, all these people are continuing to exist. You know what I'm saying? They didn't stop existing just because they died. You know what I'm saying? And so chew on that. Like I'm not saying I know everything about that, but what I do know is what we think is true in common knowledge is because we don't have all the pieces. And I wouldn't hold on to that as truth. So now that you know that, would you be running to commit suicide? Because what's interesting with Job is he reverences God so much that even though he wants to die, he realizes that the choice of life and death belongs to God, and he doesn't see killing himself as one of his options. He doesn't see suicide as one of his options, which is really interesting because since he believes that dying would end everything and that his only comfort is in death, it's interesting that he refuses to kill himself. But I think the reason he refuses to kill himself is his reverence for God and his understanding that he's in God's control and he can't take matters into his own hands. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times we think we can take matters into his own hand. If I ask God to heal my body and he won't do it, then I'm going to have this procedure and that's how I'm going to get healed. I mean, we might not overtly think that, but that's how sometimes we're operating. I'm not saying that you shouldn't get procedures and get medical help help to be healed, but understand that you're not going around God by seeing a doctor. You're not going around God by having a procedure because any successful procedure that brings healing is from God. Healing comes from God no matter what. Okay? Because if you're not going to be healed, you're not going to be healed. If God said you're not going to be healed, you're not going to be healed. He's a God that opens doors that no man can shut. And when he shuts a door, no man can open it. Okay? So just understand that if you really think God's not going to heal you, you're not going to be healed. But if you then receive your healing by going to the doctor, just know your healing came from God. And he used the doctor to do it. Okay? So your assumption that if you did get healed, your assumption that God wouldn't heal you was wrong. That's what was the wrong assumption. Your assumption that God wouldn't heal you was wrong. What you were really thinking is the I don't even want to say supernatural. We got to watch the words that we use. Okay? Your ability to immediately see the absence of your symptoms. Your belief that God would do it that way was wrong. And instead, you got healed because you had a procedure done. No, I don't even think that's the right way to say it either. Okay? Because you are in fact healed. And then God allowed you to have a procedure done. And everything in the natural lines up with what's already true in the physical. That's really how we need to think about it. And I know it looks like, you know, I'm splitting hairs, but there are so many underlying lies that rest on thinking about things the wrong way and having the wrong assumptions that I believe that's the root cause of why we can't really walk out, the victory of experiencing God's kingdom right now, right here, right now. You know what I'm saying? Because we believe so many lies, and a lot of it is because of the way we think of things, and that's not really how it is. We're not walking in the truth of God. And so I've been challenging myself. And I'm not saying I said it perfectly, but I'm happy to acknowledge that, the it's you have to be careful how you're thinking about it, that it lines up with the truth of how things really are, if that makes any sense. Silly Mommy for Life said, um, so I take it off. So I take off the lyrics talking about shedding this body, and because God has the last say. Yes, God has the last. God not only has the last say. Everything works and moves according to His perfect purpose and plan. Silly Mommy for Life says, right, that's what I am told. The healing is coming from God through the doctors, through the hospitals. You're correct. Amen. If that's what he tells you to do. I think if you discover sickness in your body, I really would encourage you to pray and ask God what to do. You know, and if you go to the doctor and they present a treatment plan to you, I would really encourage you to pray and ask God, is this what I should do? Is this how you want me to proceed with this? You know, I think doing everything we know how to do and then asking God to bless it is not a thing, y'all. Is not a thing. Is not a thing. More and more and more, I'm learning that go to God and ask Him first. Go to God and ask Him to direct you first so that you're walking on the right path in the first place. And know that He's good, and know that He wants to answer you, and know that He promises to answer you. And even before you ask, He's seeking for somebody to look for Him. You know what I'm saying? And that Jesus has made the way. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, guys, I could go into sermon 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. So I'm going to let you guys go so I can start my day. And I think that's it for all of the comments. Be blessed, y'all. I'm turning this around so I could stop the live.